Aw yeah, welcome chromatic warriors to another seance, and at this most special seance we'll be summoning both machine and meat in the form of the robot and the pig. Yeah, this piece came together randomly. I was looking for something else at the local shop and walked away with this old Battletech model. It's called a Sentinel, I believe, and it's from 1993. I had a pig laying around. I don't know where the ideas come from. I am just a vessel. I won't question. I will just create. So I'm just going to make everything. But yeah, I love this piece. When I'm creating something like, let's say I'm painting a Space Marine librarian, it's fun, but the story is already written for that model. With this, though, didn't know quite what I was creating as I'm doing it, but it was writing itself as I was working on it, and it gives me kind of Studio Ghibli vibes. I'll write up the full short story down below, but what comes to mind is that this is a farming robot, B.E.N. That'll be an acronym for like Biosphere Environment Navigator, and it's basically a futuristic farming tool. It's been given orders to watch the pig. The farmer is long since dead. Ben's out of bullets. The pig knows how to find what it needs. This unlikely couple sets off on an adventure. But how did you paint it? We're here to find out. To begin, I had a zenithal base coat, just the old standard, the black base, a white overcoat. I readied up some tones. I was taking a look at that massive box of airbrush paints from the Army Painter. Yeah, I found some bleached bone and molten orange as my main tones. I'll pull some desert yellow into play to break things up. There's a lot of open space on this piece, and I think it could be contained on a smaller base, but it wouldn't feel the same. I have a little more room to work, and it adds to this. I'm going for this arid desert atmosphere. But yeah, I'm just spraying those tones in place, going back and forth. There was a lot of back and forth. Honestly, I should have started this with a paintbrush. Airbrushing over it to get these softer values, that's great. But yeah, there's a lot of texture that I wish I would have just jammed my bristles inside of. But so I think it took me, it took a little more back and forth, but I'm always trying to try something a little bit new and different, whatever. Once I was satisfied with my dusty tones, I brought some matte black into play and just capped off that rocky outcropping that kind of forms the background and adds a gentle lean to the whole situation. I also quickly picked out the little makeshift bridge with some German gray. All of this material is going to be just doused in weathering powder, so I can kind of get away with a lot. I can cut some corners, you know, but yeah, just a nice even coat of German gray. I start in the middle. I start to run out of paint as I get towards either end of the bridge. It becomes diluted. That's fine with me. Anyways, I want to get all that out of the way so I can give it a nice even dry brushing of bleached bone. Magnifique. Once all the dust was settled, I laid down a thin layer of ochre clay from the speed paint line. I used some of the speed paint medium, but then just force of habit, I started adding water to it to dilute, so just very, very thin amounts. Thickening in some areas, you can play around with this. Obviously you can see the kind of varying tonations and densities at play just to create some soft varieties. And I also brought some grim black into those smoky crags, making up the backdrop. Those Marlboro Mountains. And now it's time for the bot, or Ben. At the time of the script making, the bot did not have a name, but thanks to my Twitch chat, we named him Ben. Biosphere Environment Navigator. Perfect. So this would be another lumpy round model, perfect for the airbrush. I busted out some crow hue. Gives me a nice cool green gray to build things up from, and it'll look nice against all of these warm yellow tones. And have no fear, lay it on thick. This is your base coat. Slowly though, with my mix in my cup, I started adding bleached bone. I did this 2 steps up, but just lightening it with an ivory, producing a lighter and lighter tone, and working with the 3-dimensional aspects of the model, we'll call it that. I can just working from the right angles to produce some cool, very soft but specular highlights. And I have to keep in mind the robot is going to be tilted back a little bit when it's finally attached to its base. It's sculpted leaning forward in a strange way, so I just kind of carved into the cork on the base. It'll be tilted back a little bit. What could possibly go wrong? But as I'm slowly escalating in my chroma war, I began adding a little bit of white to take it up even further, and shazam, base coat applied. Next up, the boring part, base coats. I just have some various areas to color block in. You know, I want to give him this industrial, strange, kind of paneled, separated look, so I'm just kind of blocking things out randomly. I don't want to get hung up on every single sculpted rectangle being a different color. But yeah, pulling in some Scarlet for giving me kind of a construction orange and some dark blue pale in the shoulder area, the arm. I also add some Thornwood green for the satchels, gunmetal and bronze for the various metal bits. All of those pieces that weren't metal, the metal received a silver highlight, but yeah, everything else I just add some skeleton bone as a unifying highlight. I'll just add that to the Scarlet, the dark blue pale. It'll lighten things up, it'll keep it ivory, you know, desaturated and weathered, a little sun bleached. Perfect. Once all these areas were blocked in though, I took some matte black and a little bit of Thornwood green in the dirty old airbrush. I know it's very dirty, but it gets the job done, and sprayed upward from the bottom, a nice anti-zenithal shadow, unifying all these tones as they submerge and sink down to the similar depth, descending into nothingness. Then it was time for some edging and dark lining, mainly with skeletal bone and the associated color. The edges are a bit shallow, and I found I had better luck just with the dark lining. So nice fine brush, thinned to a medium amount, and you want to lead things along. Don't try to pencil it into that crevice, just lead it through the crevice and your bristles will pull into that very shallow groove, or hopefully a more recently sculpted model with deeper recesses. It's simple. I believe in you. With all these areas divided, it was time for a little strong tone and some dark wash in the associated bits. I want to put a brown wash on the leathers, the satchel, the brasses, and then there's the kind of deep gray and silver areas that needed a wash of the black. Then it was time for the visor. This is my one chance. I mean, I'm making all these rules for myself, but this is my chance, I feel, to bring a vibrant color into play. I settled on magenta. Why not? I liked the hot pink from the Necrons in the last project, but this could literally be any color. I just wanted to pick something that read as more anime. You know, I wanted that Studio Ghibli look. The more I'm working on this and thinking about it, it needs an animated touch. So I added Murder's magenta, black, and white to my palette. Pretty simple, just adding white to get the brighter areas and black for the depths. I know, crazy. But what is not so crazy here is going for that kind of bubble-shaped highlight effect. You know, I want these to have a more kind of rounded shape to them. And what's cluing me in as to the placement is just keeping in mind that specular highlight, that optimal viewing angle when you are facing this piece from straight on. I want that reflection to be just so across the visor. And yeah, there's a lot of room to play with this. Just make it look glossy and glistening, and slowly adding amounts of white until you get to just rounded portions of pure white. I love it. Dun, 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 dun. Kumate, kumate. Yes, that satisfying moment of touchdown where I could finally glue the model to the base and then, yeah, kind of kick myself because I have to make everything match. But I'll throw some texture paste over that, paint it the right color, yada yada yada. No one's the wiser. So if I can keep my secrets with you, then my secrets will be safe. But they call me Mr. Barbecue in the streets. And it was time for the pig. I started off by just laying down a couple coats of tan flesh from Monument. Yeah, just get things established. Then, you guessed it, wet blending. Since Thornwood green seemed to be a popular color to be thrown around, I wanted to just I'll look at a project and ask what colors have already been used before I start introducing new ones. So while I'm here and I have a wet palette, I'll throw some ice yellow in with the tan flesh and just roughly throw it down on those upward facing areas. It's a very flat and simple model, so not a lot of places to go with this first stage. You can gotta run over everything at once. I was also looking at some pig pictures online. This doesn't have to be a simple pink pig. I pulled some deep dots into the haunches and a little bit on the ear, just some black and thornwood green to create those. So the main coat is established. Time to refine things. I began layering ice yellow and tan flesh over the rounded upward shapes again, going right over the dark dots, just adding more saturation, more layers of tone and dilution. It's all going to play upon its own transparencies. And further sharpening with the addition of white to the previous mix, covering smaller areas, just tightening things up. The dots on the hindquarters and seams were picked out with black and thornwood green as well, just keeping everything light, diluted, smooth. Then I found myself picking out some kind of rounded sections. There's not a lot to shade on with this model, but the rest of the piece has a lot of contrast, so just pulling out some kind of circular highlights around its front and rear pair of shoulders and a little bit on the side of the gut to just brighten, make things look a little more robust. Then I was finally onto the base, kind of a bonus lap after all this detailed work, and God, this piece is a lot about the atmosphere and the whole idea that I'm going to smother it in weathering powder. So I have a few options available. I ended up not using the deepest one. Mainly you have this yellow earth and this white at play with some rust orange down in the crevices. Using a little dry brush from Army Painter helps to kind of smooth things around, fuzz them out. And yeah, here and there I'm adding the white in with the yellow earth. Just doing a little bit of dusty dancing with a face mask. Do not inhale chalk or whatever kind of chemicals are in the weathering powder, especially if you're doing such an extensive amount. So don't inhale, kids. I also brought some strong tone into play. Of course, all those kind of cracked up areas were all dusted over, so I wanted to re-infer the slight presence of moisture by just dropping strong tone down in a little gulch. And there were some areas that I left flat as well. This is the whole kind of lead up into this thing. The pig is seeking a drink of muddy water. So Mod Podge Dimensional Magic plus black and some bloodstone. Lay it on down over a base coat of those same colors to make a slightly dark impression, and voila, tiny watering holes. It's done. All done, and what fun. Oh boy, I love my new toy. Well, it's just gonna sit in the cabinet and collect dust, but cool. I'm really enjoying making dioramas lately. I think it's the pinnacle of miniature painting. And I know not everybody is going to look at this and want to make exactly this, but it just had me thinking in a lot of directions. I hope it inspires you too. This, action creates motivation. It has me thinking about more dioramas. It'll also be something fun to have to show off. But this is the part where I ramble. All I really want to say that hasn't been said is thank you. I appreciate your support, your encouragement on Patreon, on YouTube as well. Thank you for liking and subscribing. But yeah, I can't do it without you, so thank you for taking an interest in the art that I make. And very elated at the end of every video, so I hope you are too. Remain unchained.